Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're probably here because you want to get straight to the facts about conjugated linoleic acid, CLA.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there.
Exactly. You've maybe seen the headlines, heard it mentioned, is this natural way to reshape your body. So we've done the homework for you. We got a scientific review from PMC, a big meta-analysis from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition.
Good sources, solid stuff.
Right. And we've also looked at some of those bolder claims floating around about CLA blocking fat and all that.
Ah, yes, the marketing claims. We need to talk about those.
Definitely. So our mission today is pretty simple. Cut through it all and figure out what CLA really does based on the science.
Exactly. You're likely wondering, can it actually help your body choose muscle over storing fat?
Right, that's a big one.
And does it stop fat cells from getting bigger? Or make your workouts burn more fat? We're going to dig into what the evidence actually says.
Okay, let's start at square one then. What is CLA? Lay it out for us.
Okay, so CLA stands for Conjugated Linoleic Acid. Basically, it's a group of polyunsaturated fatty acids.
Healthy fats then?
Yeah, you could say that. They occur naturally in foods from ruminant animals.
Like cows and sheep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So beef, lamb, dairy products, think butter, milk, cheese. That's where you find it naturally.
Interesting. You said a group of fatty acids.
Yes, that's key. It's not just one single thing. There are actually at least 28 different versions, isomers they're called, each one slightly different structurally.
28?
Wow.
Okay, are there main ones we should know about?
Definitely. The two you hear about most and the ones most studied are cis-9, trans-11 CLA, sometimes called 9011 CLA, or rumetic acid.
Okay.
And the other big one is trans-10, cis-12 CLA, or 10,012 CLA. Those are the most common ones found in food.
Gotcha. 9011 and 10,012. And what about supplements? Are they the same?
Good question. Supplements are usually made synthetically, often from vegetable oils like safflower oil. And this process usually results in what they call mixed CLA. It's roughly a 50-50 blend of that 9011 and the 10,012 isomer, plus maybe some others in smaller amounts.
So it's similar, but the ratio might be different than what you'd get from, say, eating beef.
Precisely. The balance isn't quite identical to the natural sources. It's an important distinction.
Okay. Now, the name, trans linoleic acid, that word trans makes people nervous, right? Is it like the unhealthy trans fats?
That's a really crucial point. So technically, structure-wise, it is a trans fatty acid because it has a trans double bond. But, and this is important, the FDA doesn't classify it as a trans fat for labeling. It actually got GRAS status, generally regarded as safe, back in 2008.
Okay, GRAS status, that's reassuring.
Yeah, so the thinking is the industrially produced trans fats, the artificial ones, those are the ones linked strongly to heart disease risk.
Right, the ones in processed foods.
Exactly, but these naturally occurring ruminant-derived trans fats like CLA, they don't seem to have that same negative link. Some studies even hint they might be neutral or maybe even slightly beneficial for heart health, though that's still being researched.
Okay, that's a really important difference for people to grasp. So not all trans fats are the bad guys.
Not necessarily, no. Context matters.
All right, let's get to the main event then. CLA and fat loss. This is probably why most people are tuning in. The first claim we often hear is that CLA redirects fat to muscle instead of storage. What's the science say?
Okay, well, the review paper highlights some really interesting animal studies. Mice, rats, hamsters, pigs. In these animals, giving them CLA, especially that mixed kind or the 10,012 isomer on its own, did tend to lead to fat loss.
How much fat loss are we talking?
Well, there's one pretty striking mouse study where a diet with mixed CLA led to a 60% drop in body fat.
60%? In how long?
Just 30 days.
Wow. That's...
They attributed it to increased lipolysis, that's breaking down stored fat, and also increased fat oxidation, so burning that fat for energy.
Okay, 60% in mice.
Yeah.
That sounds almost too good to be true for humans. What happens when we look at the human studies?
Yeah, this is where things get, let's say, a bit more modest.
Uh-oh.
So the meta-analysis, pooling data from 18 human studies, did find an effect. Taking CLA at an average dose of about 3.2 grams per day resulted in a statistically significant but modest loss in body fat compared to placebo.
Modest. Define modest.
They actually calculated it. It worked out to about 0.024 kilograms of fat loss per gram of CLA taken per week. So over several weeks or months, it adds up, but it's not dramatic rapid loss.
0.024 kilograms per gram per week.
Yeah.
If you take 3 grams a day, that's like 21 grams a week.
Yeah.
Times 0.024. That's about half a kilo, maybe a pound. of fat loss over, what, 10 weeks? Ish?
Roughly, yeah. That's the ballpark from that meta-analysis average. Some individual studies did show a bit more, sometimes dose-dependently, but many others failed to show significant effects on body weight or fat at all.
So it works. A little bit. But not the massive effect seen in mice. Why the difference?
Well, humans are obviously different physiologically. Plus, study designs vary, the exact CLA doses and isomer mixes vary. It makes direct comparisons tricky. The meta-analysis suggested the effect was linear for about 6 months and then sort of plateaued.
Okay, plateaued. That's interesting. So back to that claim. Redirects fat to muscle. Is there evidence for that specific mechanism in humans? Does it build muscle while burning fat?
The evidence for a significant redirection is less clear in humans. While, yes, some studies reported increases in lean body mass, especially at lower doses or when combined with exercise.
With exercise, that makes sense.
Right. The more consistent finding across the board in humans is that small reduction in fat mass. The lean mass effect seems less pronounced or maybe conditional on other factors like resistance training.
Got it. So the takeaway is maybe a slight boost for lean mass if you're already working out, but mostly it's about that modest fat loss.
That seems to be the fairest summary of the current human data, yeah.
Okay, let's move to claim number 2. CLA prevents fat cells from expanding. What about that one?
There's some intriguing animal data there. The PMC review mentioned a study in rats where CLA seemed to reduce the actual size of the fat cells, the adipocytes.
So not fewer cells, just smaller ones.
Exactly. Like, the existing fat storage balloons just didn't inflate as much, which, could relate to preventing expansion and limiting how much fat can be stored in each cell.
Makes sense conceptually. Is that confirmed in humans, though?
That's the catch. We need more specific human research looking at fat cell size and morphology to see if that mechanism holds true for us. It's plausible, based on the animal data, but not definitively shown in humans yet.
Okay, plausible, but needs more digging.
Got it.
All right. On to claim 3, the one about exercise. CLA brings more fat during exercise. True.
There's some supportive evidence, again, starting with animals. A mouse study found that the 10,012 CLA isomer actually boosted their endurance by increasing fatty acid oxidation. Their bodies got better at using fat for fuel during activity.
Okay, that's relevant. What about humans?
There was a human study mentioned that found supplementing with mixed CLA increased fat burning, but interestingly, it was primarily measured during sleep.
During sleep, not during exercise.
The study highlighted the effect during sleep, yeah. Which is still interesting, implies a potential shift in metabolism even at rest.
Definitely appealing, burning fat while you sleep. But does it translate to burning significantly more fat when you're actually, running or lifting weights?
That specific connection, a major boost during exercise in humans, isn't super strongly established in the reviewed literature. The resting fat oxidation finding is suggestive. It hints that overall fat metabolism might be enhanced, which could indirectly help.
But it's not a slam dunk for boosting workout fat burn based on this.
Not a slam dunk based purely on the major reviews we looked at, no. More focused human studies measuring fat oxidation during different types of exercise would be needed to really confirm that specific claim robustly.
Okay, so potential, but maybe not the primary effect. Now, let's address that marketing line. Studies show CLA can nearly double fat loss when taken in doses of 6 to 8 grams per day. What's the reality check from the science?
Well, it's true that some of the earlier human studies did use doses in that higher range, like up to 6.8 grams per day. And yes, those studies often did report reductions in body fat.
So there is some basis for it.
There's some basis in some studies. However, the big picture from the meta-analysis, remember, pointed to that modest effect being significant at an average dose around 3.2 grams per day.
Right, the 3.2 gram figure.
And that meta-analysis also suggested the effect might level off after about 6 months. So the idea that just taking double the dose, say 6-8 grams instead of 3-4, will automatically nearly double your fat loss indefinitely, that might be stretching the broader evidence.
So it's possibly an oversimplification, or maybe based on specific cherry-picked results rather than the overall consensus?
That's a reasonable interpretation. Higher doses might yield slightly more loss for some people, perhaps, but the doubling claim isn't consistently supported as a general rule by the comprehensive analyses. We just don't have enough consistent data at those very high doses across many studies to back that specific strong claim.
Okay, that's a very important clarification. Dose matters, but it's not necessarily a simple, linear, more is always much better situation.
Seems that way, yeah. And the plateau effect is also key.
Right, so we've covered fat loss, cell size, exercise burn. What about other health effects? Anything else pop up in the research?
Yes, the review touched on a few other areas. There's been interest in anti-cancer effects. Animal studies showed some promise in various carcinoma models.
What in humans?
In humans, the results are pretty mixed. There's just not enough strong evidence yet to say CLA significantly affects cancer risk in people.
Okay, so TBD on that one. Anything else?
Heart health. Potential anti-atherosclerotic effects, reducing plaque buildup again, seen in some animal models like rabbits.
In humans, seeing a pattern here.
Yeah. Mixed results again when looking at actual cardiovascular disease risk factors in human studies. No conclusive proof of protection.
Right. And blood sugar.
That's another complex area. Effects on glucose metabolism seem variable. Some hints of improved insulin sensitivity in certain groups, like obese kids in one study. But other studies, especially with that 10,012 isomer, have actually reported increased insulin resistance sometimes. So it's complicated.
Wow, yeah. Increased insulin resistance is definitely not what you want. That sounds like something people need to be cautious about.
Absolutely. It highlights that the effects aren't universally positive and can depend on the specific isomer, the dose, and the individual's health status.
So it really seems like outside of that modest body fat effect, the other potential health benefits are still very much under investigation in humans.
That's a fair summary, yes. Lots of potential pathways being explored, but clear, consistent human benefits beyond body composition aren't established yet.
Speaking of pathways, how do scientists think CLA is actually working in the body? What are the proposed mechanisms?
Well, the review mentioned several possibilities. The big ones seem to be boosting lipolysis and fat oxidation, breaking down and burning fat, like we discussed.
Okay.
There's also the idea, from animal models mostly, about browning white fat, making storage fat act a bit more like metabolically active brown fat.
Interesting. Increasing energy expenditure, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. Then there's modulation of gene expression related to fat metabolism, like affecting PPAR-alpha. We talked about the possible effect on fat cell size.
Right.
And increasingly, there's interest in how it interacts with gut bacteria, the microbiome, maybe affecting short-chain fatty acid production, plus potential anti-inflammatory roles for some forms of CLA.
It's hitting a lot of different systems, potentially.
It seems to be, yeah, which explains why the effects can be complex and sometimes contradictory.
Okay, so pulling all this together, what are the really crucial takeaways for someone listening right now, maybe thinking about trying CLA?
I think the first is managing expectations. The science points towards a modest effect on body fat reduction in humans, around that 3.2 grams per day mark. It's not a magic weight loss pill.
Modest is the key word.
Absolutely. Second, understand the variability. Study results differ based on dose, isomers used, study length, population studied. What works for one person or in one study might not apply universally.
Good point. Natural versus synthetic.
Yeah, that difference in isomer ratios between food sources and typical supplements might matter, although how much is still unclear. Safety-wise, it's generally regarded as safe, but long-term effects at high doses aren't fully known.
And that potential downside regarding insulin resistance with certain isomers.
Definitely something to be aware of, yes. And the review also noted that CLA-induced weight loss isn't always metabolically perfect, mentioning potential reductions in adiponectin, a beneficial hormone. So weight loss alone isn't the whole story of health.
Right, quality over just quantity. Okay, so final summary on the big claims, redirecting fat to muscle.
Less evidence for significant muscle gain than for modest fat loss. Maybe a supportive role with exercise.
Preventing fat cell expansion.
Plausible based on animal data on cell size, but needs human confirmation.
Burning more fat during exercise.
Some evidence for increased fat burning at rest, sleep, but the boost during exercise specifically isn't strongly confirmed in humans yet.
And doubling fat loss at 6 to 8 grams.
Likely an overstatement based on the overall evidence. Higher doses might offer slightly more benefit for some, but probably not double, and effects might plateau.
Okay, so potential, but nuanced and modest seem to be the main themes from the science.
I think that's fair, and it underscores that supplements aren't a replacement for the fundamentals.
Absolutely. You still need a balanced diet, regular exercise. That's the foundation.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, for listeners who, after hearing all this, are still curious and want to look into CLA supplements, we will put some links to reputable brands in the description.
Okay.
However, and this is really non-negotiable, please talk to your doctor or a healthcare professional first.
Yes. Crucial advice.
They can help you figure out if it's even appropriate for you, considering your health status, any medications you're on, and discuss safe dosages. Don't just self-prescribe based on marketing.
Sound advice. Health first. Always.
All right, well, I think that covers our deep dive into conjugated linoleic acid. Hopefully this gave everyone a much clearer picture, grounded in the actual research.
Yeah, hope it was helpful. It's a fascinating area, and the science is always moving.
It really is. And maybe here's a final thought to chew on. We talked about natural sources like grass-fed beef and dairy having CLA. Could optimizing our diet to include more high-quality natural sources be a more holistic way to potentially get some CLA benefits alongside everything else those whole foods offer, rather than just relying on a supplement?
That's a great point. Food synergy is powerful. Definitely something worth considering.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.